Hello, students. We're going to take a few minutes and go through the discussion about what your learning check number one should have looked like. I'm not going to specifically give you answers in this, but I do want you to listen as I go through this. You can also pay attention to this storyboard. I'm going to use that as my basis. And I want you to go through and I want you to pay attention to the parts of natural selection that I talk about in these different sections of this storyboard. Then I want you to take that information and I want you to go correct your learning check. You need to make sure that your learning check has been graded before you do the corrections, please. So triclosan is an antibiotic, and we've talked about that. So what we're going to look at here is that before we have before we have any kind of changes at all, we're going to introduce something into the environment. So before triclosan, we have an environment where there are no antibiotics. So there are non-resistant bacteria that are living just fine in the environment that we have. We do have some resistant bacteria, but since there's no triclosan present, it doesn't really matter. In this case, probably neither one really is an adaptation, but the non-resistant bacteria can live just fine. They may have other adaptations that make it so that they live very well on people's hands. So we're going to look at this and we're going to say, okay, so what's going to happen as we have a change in the environment, as we add triclosan to that environment? Well, one of the things that we can go ahead and do, because you have seen the data, is that we can go ahead and we can make a claim. And we can say in that claim that the non-resistant bacteria will decrease over time due to natural selection. And we can say that the resistant bacteria will increase over time also due to natural selection. Those would be your two claims, and those would need to go into the correct spots in your learning check. And it's divided out for you so that you can talk about the non-resistant bacteria in one part and the resistant bacteria in another. So we know, as we look through these next few slides, we already know what's going to happen because we've seen the data. We know that the non-resistant bacteria are going to be selected against, and their numbers are going to go down. We know that the resistant bacteria are going to be selected for, and their numbers are going to go up. So what we need to talk about is what's our evidence in this case? So our evidence right now would be what we see happening through here. So we have evidence, first of all, that triclosan is present in the environment. You can also say that resistant and non-resistant bacteria are already present in the environment. So those are two environmental things that you can pull from your reading and from this presentation. Now, the next part of that is we've got to talk about our data. And so this part of the storyboard talks us through the data. You can also see the data on your paper. And so as we're looking at this right here, we see that there's a whole lot of non-resistant bacteria to start out. As time goes on, you notice that there's less non-resistant bacteria and more resistant bacteria until we get to the end of the study and we find out that the non-resistant bacteria is at a very low percentage and the resistant bacteria is a much higher percentage. So in the evidence portion, in addition to bringing in the pieces of information from your reading and from this that we just talked about, you also need to bring in some data. So you're going to talk about that your non-resistant bacteria decreased from whatever percentage you find to whatever percentage you find. So you would put that in and you would put in the actual data. You're going to talk about what it started at, what it ended at. So you're going to have to find that information and put it in. Then you would also talk about the resistant bacteria increasing over the time. So you're not just going to say it increased, but you're going to actually give a summary of that data. You're going to say what the beginning percentage was and what the ending percentage was. You're going to have to find that again. Okay, so once you have that, you've got your claim and you've got your evidence, and now we're going to have to talk about our reasoning. And so this slide also has some of that reasoning. So you're going to want to talk about selective pressure. Selective pressure is applied in this situation in our changing environment. So when triclosan is introduced into the environment, we now have selective pressure. When triclosan is introduced into the environment, we now have selective pressure. So one type of bacteria has been selected against, the non-resistant bacteria has been selected against. They are at a selective disadvantage. You can use those words. And the other type of bacteria has been selected for. So resistant bacteria has been selected for. Resistant bacteria can survive in the presence of triclosan. Since it can survive, since it can live and then reproduce in the presence of triclosan, it's going to survive and reproduce and survive and reproduce and survive and reproduce. Now, if somebody washes their hands, could some of that be killed? Sure, absolutely. If something, whatever, there's all kinds of different ways that some of that resistant bacteria might also be killed, but those are not the point here. The point is that within this particular situation, there is a selective advantage for being resistant. So the resistant bacteria have an adaptation. They do not adapt. They have an adaptation. They have a trait that has occurred since that little bacterium came into existence. So they have an adaptation that allows them to be more likely to survive and reproduce in this environment. And that is the basic idea of what you need to make sure that you have as you go through and correct your work. This is really important because on Thursday you're going to take your test. And so we want to make sure that you have all the information that you need in order to be able to answer very well on your test. Okay, so go ahead and correct your learning check number 1 and get yourself ready for your next part of this unit. One thing that I do want to point out here is that nowhere in this do we talk about the hands. Nowhere in this do we talk about something being stronger or weaker. Nowhere in this do we talk about one thing is stronger than another one, any of those kinds of things, okay? So make sure that you focus very well on on the language that we use. All right, see you guys in class. Hello. Somebody's got your mic on. Go ahead and turn that off, please. Hello, folks. It's a little bit after 12:30. Sorry I was a little bit late getting this started. I'm making a video for tomorrow that you guys will use for part of your offline work. And so that took right up until the very last second there. All right. Okay. So we've got most people in here, it looks like. Maybe not everybody. Let's see how many I've got. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and start today. What I am showing you is what we're going to work on today. So the very first thing, the very top priority on today's learning is that we're going to do some revisions, or we're going to finish in the first place on our learning check number 1 from yesterday. We're going to do a discussion in class about that, and I think you're going to want to wait until we get done with that discussion to do any work there. Okay, so then the second thing on here is once you have done this work up here, so we're going to have our discussion, then you're going to do your work, then you're going to need to go and do some stuff from last week. And this is part of your review. So this is making sure that you're ready for a summative test that we're going to have on Thursday. You are going to have a summative test on Thursday. So we're going to finish our learning check today. That learning check needs to be finished as quickly as possible so that I can check it and I can get some feedback to you, and then you can work on correcting it and make sure that you understand what you missed so that you are ready for your test on Thursday. So this number 2 part is all about making sure that you're ready. So it's all about working on reviewing, going back and checking things, going back and looking through what we did in class so that you're reviewing your notes, so that you're correcting your thoughts that at first probably weren't exactly correct or weren't completely correct. This is brand new. So you should have a better understanding this week than you did last week. And so if you've got a better understanding, you should be able to go back and do some work on that. So you're going to check, did you finish Tuesday's natural selection activity? If you didn't, rather than just going back and finishing it, I would go back and do the corrections, because you're not going to really get a score for just doing it. I want to know that you do it correctly. And so on Thursday, I uploaded a video that goes through the discussion that we went through in class. So you should be able to go through that information, and you should be able to work on that and make sure that you have the correct answers for last week's natural selection activity. And we did work on that for several days. Okay, so that's A and B. Did you correct Tuesday's natural selection activity from Thursday's discussion? Make sure that you go do that. Now, did you do the in-class quizzes activity on Thursday? Most of you did, but there are a few of you who did not. So you're going to want to go to quizzes. I think there's an extra link in last week that lets you get to the quizzes activity. Once you've done that, it was an in-class activity. It was kind of a game type of thing, but it's something that I want to see that you've done. You can do that quizzes activity 3 times. So make sure that you do that. And I think that it's set to shut down, but I'm going to open it back up for tomorrow. I probably won't do that until the end of the day, but I'm going to open it back up for tomorrow so that you can go through and do it again if you want to. Then Quizlet. Quizlet, the vocabulary. We have had trouble with Quizlet, the vocabulary, because people didn't join my class. So let's hop over here. Let's take a second and let's join this class. There is a class that says 2021 8th grade science. If you're not in that class, I can't see your work. If you're in the class, I can see your work. So how do you join it? Well, you go to Google Classroom. I'm not Miss Thompson, so let's make sure that we're not in the wrong spot. You guys should be in Google Meet right now. Everybody should be in Google Meet. I do have Dino up because I'm kind of tired of people being in 7,000 places where they're not supposed to be. Okay, so in Google Classroom, if you go over to classwork and you scroll down to where it says vocab, natural selection due January 8th, if you click on that and look at the comments, I gave you the link to the comments. If you guys have a question for me, you need to email me. Because if you put a comment in Google Classroom, I'm probably not going to see it. So if you want to get some information from me for something, you're going to have to email me. All right. So link to my class right here. Click on that. Go make sure that you join my class. And right now I have 47 members, and I should see several more. As soon as you guys have linked to my class, then I'm going to show you what else you need to do.